Let's go Ravens! A surprising debate is suddenly gaining momentum around Lamar Jackson, and Ravens fans may not agree with what was recently said about their franchise quarterback. Because according to a recent national discussion, there are people questioning whether Lamar Jackson and the Ravens can return to the level of success they achieved before last season. And the reasons being given have sparked strong reactions from those who follow the team closely. Before we continue, make sure you've already hit the like button if you're a true Baltimore Ravens fan. And if you're optimistic about this team's future, leave a comment below. Go Ravens! The future is bright! I want to see how many members of Ravens flock still believe Lamar Jackson is ready to remind everyone exactly who he is this season. Now let's get directly into the story. The conversation began with criticism directed toward Lamar Jackson's 2025 season. The discussion pointed to statistical regression compared to some of the best years of his career, highlighting a completion percentage of 63.6%, 2,500 passing yards, 21 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, and 13 games played. Based on those numbers, the argument was made that Lamar had taken a step backward and that Baltimore could face significant challenges moving forward. But that's where the debate truly started, because the response to those comments was immediate. The argument against the criticism wasn't that Lamar had his greatest season. The argument was that statistics alone failed to tell the entire story. According to the discussion, injuries became a major factor. It was claimed that Lamar battled physical issues for much of the season, beginning early in the year and continuing throughout the remainder of the schedule. The discussion even referenced comments from Lamar indicating that he stopped feeling completely like himself after week 3. And that changes the conversation. Because now the debate is no longer simply about numbers. It's about context. It's about circumstances. And it's about determining whether the statistics accurately reflected the player Ravens fans were watching every week. The discussion then pointed toward Lamar's performance during the opening weeks of the season. According to the information presented, during the first 3 games he completed 72.3% of his passes, averaged 240 passing yards per game, averaged 39 rushing yards per game, accounted for 10 total touchdowns, and did not throw an interception. Those numbers were used as evidence that Lamar was playing at a very high level before physical limitations began affecting him. That's a significant point, because it suggests there may be 2 very different ways to evaluate the season. One approach focuses on the final statistics. The other focuses on the circumstances surrounding those statistics. Another major part of the discussion involved the environment around Lamar Jackson. The argument was made that issues beyond the quarterback position contributed to the challenges Baltimore faced. Offensive line play, defensive performance, and coaching changes were all mentioned as factors that may have impacted the team's overall results. That perspective led to perhaps the strongest disagreement of the entire conversation. Because while some people see coaching changes as a reason for concern, others view them as a reason for optimism. The discussion argued that new leadership should not automatically be viewed as a negative development. Instead, it suggested that change can sometimes create new opportunities and new advantages for a team trying to move forward. And honestly, Ravens fans, that's where this story becomes really interesting. Because expectations for Lamar Jackson remain incredibly high. Every season gets analyzed. Every statistic gets debated. Every win and every loss becomes part of a much larger conversation. But one thing became clear throughout this discussion. There's still tremendous confidence in Lamar Jackson's ability to bounce back. The belief expressed was that the quarterback remains capable of returning to the level fans have come to expect from him and helping Baltimore return to double-digit wins despite all the changes taking place around the organization. However, Lamar Jackson wasn't the only Ravens player suddenly finding himself at the center of controversy. Because another discussion exploded involving Zay Flowers. And the comments directed toward the Ravens receiver quickly became one of the most talked about topics of the day. What was said about Flowers was blunt, controversial, and guaranteed to create strong reactions among Ravens fans. And the response to those comments may tell us everything we need to know about how people inside and outside Baltimore view one of the team's most important offensive weapons. The discussion surrounding Lamar Jackson was already generating plenty of debate, but then attention suddenly shifted toward another key piece of Baltimore's offense, Zay Flowers. And what was said immediately caught people's attention. According to the discussion, Antonio Brown made several harsh comments about Flowers during a live stream. The criticism was direct, questioning Flowers' reliability and even suggesting that he played a role in Lamar Jackson's inability to win. The remarks quickly spread across social media and became a major talking point among football fans. But what made the situation interesting wasn't necessarily the comments themselves. It was the reaction to them. because the discussion didn't focus on defending the criticism. Instead, it focused on whether the comments deserved attention in the first place. The response was blunt. The argument presented was that Flowers should not concern himself with opinions coming from that source and that Ravens fans shouldn't overreact either. The discussion essentially treated the situation as noise rather than meaningful football analysis. And honestly, Ravens fans, that may be the most revealing part of the entire story. Because sometimes the biggest debates online aren't actually football debates. They're attention debates. They're reaction debates. And they're designed to create headlines. The conversation then moved away from Zay Flowers and shifted toward a completely different NFL story. One that had unexpectedly generated discussion involving the Ravens. The topic centered around quarterback Brendan Sorsby. According to the discussion, the NFL announced that it would not hold a supplemental draft this year. That decision effectively closed off a path Sorsby had hoped to use in order to enter the league this season. The league's response stated that it had no prior plans to conduct a supplemental draft and that the circumstances presented were not enough to alter those plans. The reason Ravens fans became interested in this story was because Baltimore had previously been mentioned among teams connected to Sorsby in various discussions. Not as a certainty, not as a prediction, simply as a possibility that had been discussed. And that's where opinions became very strong. The discussion made it clear that there was little interest in the Ravens pursuing that route. In fact, the belief expressed was that Baltimore should stay away from that possibility entirely. Part of that perspective came from concerns about performance. Specific games were referenced as examples of struggles during critical moments, and the discussion argued that those performances raised significant questions. But what caught my attention wasn't really the Sorsby discussion itself. It was what came next. Because once the supplemental draft possibility was effectively removed, the conversation naturally shifted toward a much bigger question. What should the Ravens do at quarterback in the future? And that's where Lamar Jackson entered the discussion once again. The argument presented was straightforward. There remains tremendous confidence in Lamar Jackson. There remains belief that he will return to form. And there remains belief that Baltimore's future still revolves around him. That's important because whenever quarterback discussions begin, speculation tends to spread quickly. But throughout this conversation, the central message stayed remarkably consistent. Faith in Lamar Jackson never disappeared. In fact, the discussion suggested that if Baltimore eventually looks at quarterbacks in the future, it would more likely involve developmental options rather than immediate replacements. The names mentioned were discussed as future possibilities rather than players expected to challenge Lamar's position. That distinction matters, because sometimes quarterback conversations create unnecessary panic. This one didn't. The overall message remained centered on confidence in Lamar Jackson and confidence that the Ravens can return to winning at a high level. And when you put everything together, that's really the common theme running through this entire discussion. Whether it was criticism from national media, whether it was criticism directed towards Zay Flowers, whether it was speculation involving other quarterbacks, the response remained largely the same. The belief is that people are overlooking context, overlooking circumstances, and overlooking what this team is still capable of accomplishing. Because if the arguments presented are correct, then the version of Lamar Jackson that people watched after injuries became a factor may not be the version fans will see this season. And if that's true, then many of the doubts currently surrounding Baltimore could disappear very quickly. That's why this upcoming season feels so important. Not because people suddenly stop believing